Irish Illustrated Insider subscribers. This is Drew Mentok, and I'm here to bring you the second episode from our new bi-weekly podcast series on the feed, Irish Illustrated Interviews. Today, we're bringing you my interview with the Notre Dame Assistant Athletics Director for Team Communications, Alan Wasielewski. Even lifelong Fighting Irish fans may be unfamiliar with Alan's work. Still, chances are he's had a significant impact on how you engage with Notre Dame football, men's basketball, or one of the several other athletic programs on campus. For more than a quarter century, Alan has held nearly every role within the Notre Dame Athletics Communication Department and Fighting Irish media. Today, he's also the team historian, filling in the knowledge gaps for fans and members of the media alike. It's a vital job for a team that has experienced more meaningful games and moments over the last 100 years than any other program in the country. There's likely no one better suited for this particular work, in part because he doesn't see it as a job. He's also been a Notre Dame obsessive for as long as he can remember, tuning out lessons from his St. Joe High School teachers in the early 90s to create play-by-plays for upcoming Fighting Irish football games or writing his own game recaps. It's as if he's been preparing for this current role for as long as he can remember. Here's my interview with Alan. Alan, thank you so much for speaking with me over the summer, the one time of the year you don't have to see me. For those who don't know, Alan has been with the university for at least the last 25 seasons, working in FIM or the sports information department, doing different jobs. But like me, you also grew up in South Bend. You went to some Catholic grade schools, and I think your relationship to the university kind of starts differently when you kind of grow up around it and you just, that's kind of all you know. So I'm kind of curious. I know this is probably taking you way back, but what's your first memory of Notre Dame and kind of what's maybe like a foundational way you kind of came up with the university or really something that sticks out early on?
Well, I did my 16 years of Catholic school, so we did all Catholic grade schools, Catholic high school, and then Holy Cross College in Notre Dame. So I put my time in. I think my earliest um, memory that I have was fighting for access to football tickets with my family. So I have a family of five. I have two older sisters. And my family had access to Fort's tickets. So there was a time where there was a battle of who got to be able to go. And I would say probably around 11, 12, 13, when I was old, I started trying to realize that going to Notre Dame football was cool, but I didn't really understand it. I didn't have the knowledge. Also, back then, you didn't take kids to games because you could take in alcohol.
Oh,
Back then, fans were allowed to take in little coolers with them, and it was a little unruly back in those days. So sometimes my parents didn't necessarily want to take me to the games. So alcohol went away. I started to go, and it started to have to be competitive with who is the one that's going to use the fourth ticket. Is it my two sisters or me? And you had to know what was going on, and you had to know, you know, you had to be able to sit there for 3 hours and not, get antsy and things like that. So I just knew that I had to like earn the right to be able to go. And the only way to know how to earn the right to be able to go is sit and watch the games with my dad at home and just be able to know what's going on. So that's like my first memories of it really starting.
okay, interesting. So did that really force you to kind of study up on things? Did you start doing extra reading or going to the
Oh yeah, yeah,
newspaper or
yeah.
how?
Yeah, and then my family's all connected in different ways. So my uncle Paul, who has passed, but he was a firefighter at Notre Dame, and one of the things he was in charge of was like the fire safety on game day. So he was always in the press box, and so he would always bring me home once I got interested in it, all the press materials, and so he'd bring me home you know, the the program with all the play-by-play and all the stats plugged into it, and I would just like dive through that stuff the next day, even though the game was over. And I just thought it was the coolest thing ever. And so that's what started me. And then like when I went to basketball games, we had a couple basketball tickets. I would sit in the stands and back then you had a program with the where you could like keep the score in it. You the twos and the threes and you knock out the numbers and things like that. And I used to do that for every game too. That's just the way I learned how to watch the games. Yeah.
Okay.
I
That's
was
really
I was stat
interesting.
nerdy way back then. Yeah. Yeah.
I remember going to like major league games and we buy like the $3, yeah,
Yep.
stat book with a pencil. But so that's just something you were doing continuously. Is that something you did all the way through up high school? Like you had to stay on top of Notre Dame
Yeah.
sports so you got to use the tickets?
It's gonna make me sound really nerdy, but at one point, like 1987, I think I definitely remember we had a computer at home, and I used to go on and write my own recaps of the games. And it's funny because at some point I had them printed out like a long time ago. But so I would go to the game, then I would take the stats, and I'd sit down and I'd write my own recap of like what I remember from the stands. And then, it's really funny stuff. You can imagine like a 14 or 15-year-old kid writing about those teams. So it was fun. But yeah, I was really into it and obsessed with it. I like to crazy levels. I used to cut out all the newspaper articles and had them all over my room. It was just what it was my hobby. And you know, I'm at the age where I remember when there was no internet, and that was like how you consume things, right? You read things and you got the paper and you dove through the paper and all that stuff. And I've seen the change through all that, but that's what it was like back then. Like you waited for that paper to come and like go through there and read all that stuff. And I was just way into it.
So is it safe to say that you kind of won the favor of your parents to start getting a lot of those tickets?
Yeah, well, I mean, my sister's aged out, part of it. My oldest sister Nancy went to college, so she wasn't around in the fall. And yeah, but I mean, I think they got to one point where they're like, yeah, we're not going to say no to Alan go to the game. And it was really fun because we used to go to since my uncle was at the firehouse, we could actually kind of like sneak in through Door Road and go park at the firehouse
Okay.
and hang out there. And when I was a kid, I'd climb all over the fire trucks and they get mad at me because I leave, fingerprints everywhere on the fire trucks. And then walk to the game. And I just remember how cool, like, to me that was to walk through campus and go to the game. So yeah, so that whole experience of doing that is what started me. And I was like, yeah, this Notre Dame football thing, it's never going to go out of my life. It's just going to be there. Yeah.
Is there a game or a player or even a moment that really sticks out to you from those years from watching, Notre Dame football that you're like, this is like something I'll never forget, or that you immortalize with one of your own stories, or that like you really
Yeah.
sticks out to you?
Well, I mean, it's really obvious, but the 88 Miami game was like, it was the peak of my young fandom. So I would have been 15 that year. Okay. So, and I really started really paying attention to the team, like I've described when Holtz took over. It's not because it was Holtz, it's just that was the age I was. And so you just peaked with that game. And that week I don't know if you could find my friends from St. Joe High School, but I was so obsessed that starting in like when I got to class on the first day that fall, I would be like, it's 72 days and 32 hours and 5 minutes until the kickoff of that game. And people used to be able to come up to me in the hallway and go, Alan, how long is it till the Miami game? And I was like, and I just would recite it and recite it. And I was so into it. And I remember that, I didn't really apply myself very well in high school because I was doing the stupid stuff during class. Like I would sit there and write play-by-plays. Like this is what's going to happen in the game, like during my religion class, right? And I would predict the score and I'd predict what the players were, and I'd just sit there and I'd write I had the depth charts memorized, and I would just write them all out. And this is what this player would do. And this is what this player would do. And I predicted the game, and I had Reggie Ho kicking like a game-winning field goal. But I remember at the game celebrating. I went down on the field with all the fans, and I looked up, and the score was 31-30, and that's the score that I had actually predicted. And that's a no. I'm
Oh
not making
wow.
that up. Yeah, so I was just like, it was crazy. So and I remember that everybody wanted to tear down the goalposts, but the cops were guarding the goalpost by the tunnel, and I was trying to get everybody organized to go after the other one, and no one listened to me, but because there's like no one guarding the other one.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, that was it. And so if you take that take that timeline, right? So I really start paying attention, late in the Faust years. And then, Holtz takes over, and that's that whole buildup to the 88 championship. And it like just takes over you. And again, you're young and dumb, and you're like, oh, it's going to be like this forever. We're going to win championship every year, and all that stuff. And it's been a while since we've done that again,
Yeah.
but yeah, it was just like there was no looking back after that. Yeah.
I'm sure predicting the score right only further influenced the fact that
Yeah.
you were going to not paying attention in class. Like, I'm sure you felt almost justified and like,
Yeah.
I need to break this game down because clearly I have
Yeah.
some maybe impact on it.
Yeah. So I'm really going to date myself, but in those days, I don't know. Do you know anything about the national newspaper? Have
Yes,
you ever
actually,
heard of that?
talked to Tim O'Malley about this, and he told
Okay.
me to bring that up to you. It's a Frank DeFord
Yes.
publication. Yes.
Yeah. So for people that don't know, the national for like, I don't know how long it was, maybe it lasted a year and a half or something like that. Was a sports daily newspaper, kind of like USA Today. And it was all sports, and it was a tabloid size, right? And there was one place in town that I could go swing by and pick it up on the way to school. And the great thing about it being tabloid size was it fit on your desk. So you could sit there during class and read the National, and that's what I would do. And that was my first thing. I was going to be a sports writer. Like I was all on board, going to be a sports writer. And then at some point it turned into something else, but that was my thing. And the National was awesome, but they just couldn't get it figured out. They couldn't get the timing figured out with the writing and all that stuff, and just kind of went away. But for a while there, it was an amazing thing. Like you would get box scores from the night before in the morning.
That's
Yeah, it's
cool.
just
And
it's hard to describe that to people now because they're like, you get it while the game's going on, but it wasn't like that back then. So
yeah, no stat broadcast
yeah,
back then.
yeah,
So you mentioned you wanted to be a sports writer. What
yeah.
kind of path did you take after high school and I know you eventually graduated from Notre Dame, but kind of describe your journey
Well,
to
yeah,
that
as I
point.
said, I didn't necessarily do my work in the classroom in high school. I can't tell you what I did because I mean my high school, it's not like I have these amazing memories from high school. I was just not mature enough or anything to take care of the opportunity that it was. So I barely graduated from St. Joe. And I was sitting there like what am I going to do? And my parents told me, we'll give you 6 months to figure things out, and then you got to figure out what you're going to do. So with the push from them and other things, I ended up looking to go into the military, and I settled on the Navy after a few things. And then I was right around my 18th birthday. I went and enlisted in the Navy, and I had to wait. I had to wait so I enlisted in July, and I had to wait till March for my billet to open up. So I went and I worked at Target for a few months, and waited for my billet to open up, and then I went off to the Navy. So, and what was really funny about that was I went down to do the ASVAB, which is it's an acronym for like your vocation that you can do in the Navy, right? And so everybody that enlists takes this test, and it basically shows the military where they can put you and where they can slot you, things like that. And I did so well in the test because again, I did not apply myself in high school, but I did like pay attention a little bit. So um, that they wanted me to be a nuclear engineer.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and my parents were like, I don't think that's for you. So um, so I ended up being a cryptologic technician, which sounds fancy, but really I was just intercepting Morse code from other countries.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and so I was stationed in Okinawa for 2.5 years and just intercepted Morse code over there and things like that. And then I would say this is gonna sound really corny, but it's the truth. My uncle, my uncle Paul, who worked at Notre Dame, got me a very early copy of Rudy on VHS. And I remember when he sent it over to me in Okinawa, it literally had, you know, Notre Dame Alumni Association on it. I think it was what they were sending around to the Notre Dame Alumni Association to watch the thing. And I watched it and I bawled, and I was in Okinawa crying. And I'm like, what am I doing over here? Like, this is where I should be, and this is where I want to go. And like the next day, I called my uncle, and I was like, I want to come back and go to Notre Dame. got accepted to Holy Cross, did 2 years of Holy Cross, went to Notre Dame, got in Notre Dame. And then the day that I got accepted in Notre Dame, not the day, but very close around there, I walked into the sports information office and I said, I want to work here. What do I got to do? So,
That's interesting. So you kind of, I mean, literally after seeing Rudy, kind of followed that path where you came back, went to
yeah,
Holy Cross, and I know he was a little bit older too. So that sounds
yeah,
like that really inspired you.
it did. I mean, it was that wake up call where you're just like, you know, I can do this and I should do this. I've, in the back of my mind, I've told myself that that's where I want to go to school, but I've never buckled down and like tried to do it. And it's just an inspiration to me. And I was just like, okay, I'm going to do it. And I know that that movie's very Hollywood, right? But at the time, you're just like, I just remember seeing the scenes from campus, and I had not been back for like a year and a half, and that was just emotional for me, right? Like, the part when he first gets there and he goes up to the guy at the gate, and it's like the guy, throw, let's go see a priest or something like that. Like, I saw that, and I've been like, I've been there. I rode bikes with my uncle through that campus and all that stuff. I'm like, what am I doing sitting here in Okinawa, Japan, man? Like, come on. So that's what I did. Yeah.
Nice. And so you graduated in 2000 from Notre Dame, and then it sounds like you had already been interning with the sports
Yeah.
information department.
Yeah. It was a lot of serendipity there. So when I walked into the office, um, the person that they pointed me to was Bernie Caffarelli. Bernie was the longtime, you know, men's basketball SID, women's basketball SID. She eventually was the sports information director for a time there. And I just walked in there and I told her who I was and how interested I was in this. I was older. By then I was 24, I think, by the time I got to Notre Dame. So, and I was just like, this is what I want to do. What do I have to do? And she like literally was like, well, our intern is leaving next year. And I was like, oh, okay, what's the intern do? And I just started following her around, and her name was Peggy Kurt. She was great to me. And I was just like, I just started embedding with her, like, and doing the job that she was doing so they could turn it over to me. But it's funny, I tell people all the time that my first year internship at Notre Dame was $12,000 a year. Yeah. So I was struggling to make it by, but it's just what I wanted to do, and it's crazy hours. But man, I was just living, I was young, single, living the life, man. It was
And so,
great.
so you kind of interned with the intern at
Yeah.
first, it sounds like.
Yeah.
But it sounds like that paid off. I mean, it sounds like that's kind of was your first job afterwards
Yeah.
as
And so
well.
I went straight into that, and I was the two big sports I had were softball and volleyball. But I pretty much worked with every sport here, to be perfectly honest with you. But and of course the first thing I was doing was like, what can I do for football? Like, what do you want me to do for football? I'll do anything for football. And so I worked my way up for by the time I shifted, it was 2005 was the last season I was in sports information, and I was the secondary football contact by then.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah.
And so I assume, yeah, it sounds like it is a little bit like it is now, where it's kind of all hands on deck, especially for
Mhm.
football. Kind of worked your way in there. But you mentioned kind of in 2005, you became the director of digital media for Notre
Yeah.
Dame
Yeah.
Sports Properties. I assume that's a precursor for Fighting Irish Media, or I'm kind of curious
Yeah.
because obviously that department and all the different things that the university does has really changed back then, or
Oh yeah.
is now. But I'm kind of curious back then, what was that role like?
Okay. So um it was the I think I'm pretty sure there was a recession going on, and I think Notre Dame was in a hiring freeze, to be honest with you. And Boo Corrigan, who's the AD at NC State right now, was still at Notre Dame, and they wanted to start doing some video for, especially on the football side. And there was a third party entity called Notre Dame Sports Properties, that was run by Scott Carrera. And Scott and Boo were the ones they're like, there was a time when we had Team Notre Dame sponsorships. They were the ones that worked on big sponsorships with like Xerox and Gatorade and McDonald's and things like that. So they were connected with the university, but they had but they were also separate. So they had the ability to hire me. So they approached me, and not for my technical prowess, but because I knew people. I had been around there and I knew everybody. So they, I thought about it for a while. Doug Walker, who was the main football contact at the time at Notre Dame, was going to Alabama. And so I had to make a decision of whether was I going to get the football job. Don't know if I was ready for it, to be perfectly honest with you, like the main football job. Don't know if I would have got it. And this other opportunity was really exciting. Um, and so I went for it. But the kicker was I kind of had to leave the university. I had to get hired by Sports Properties, not by the
Okay.
university. Okay. So it was me and Jack Nolan were the first two employees and of what was Notre Dame Sports Properties, but eventually turned into Fighting Irish Digital Media. So Jack and I started, and literally the first thing we were trying to do is get press conferences open up on the website, right? And uh, and then we started with that, and then we had the radio shows that we did. We had a post game show that we did, and then we just built it up and built it up a little bit. I think the next year we were able to add one person, and we hired Gary Pachesney, who was awesome and a amazing worker and we just started. And then one day we said, can we do live events? And we started with like the pep rally, and then we'd start with hockey games, and then we built it up and built it up, and it just kept kind of growing and growing. By the time Coach Kelly came in 2010, 2011, we started getting a little bit more access. And then we finally broke through to get some sideline access and locker room access. And then 2012 came, right? And 2012 was this amazing season that we had lots of access to, and it just built from there. And so being a part of all that, and right about, so I made that move for the 2006, 2007 season. Right about 2010, 11, they started bringing us back into the university and back under university control. And then I kind of moved back in, and then it started building up into what it is today.
Okay, and what was that like going to, you mentioned you didn't really have the technical st skills. So, I mean, were you operating a camera? What type of things
Oh
were
yeah.
you
I,
learning to do to kind of get that up and running?
it was it was guerrilla warfare, man. Like it was, I didn't know what I was doing. Okay. And but we were doing very basic stuff at the beginning. Do you know what I mean? Like literally setting up a camera and plugging into the mult box at a press conference. But back then, it was all on tape. So if you shot 45 minutes at a press conference, you had to go back and ingest 45 minutes of tape. And then usually you had to let the computer chew on that file for a good half hour to be able to get it to post, and then to upload it was
Oh.
was another 25 minutes. I mean, this was long stuff that we're doing. Nowadays, you can do that in like 2 minutes because just the way the technology has changed. I remember very distinctly that I got a big case of equipment that they ordered. Um, and it was like Final Cut Pro, I think, was the first thing I ever edited on, and I didn't even know how to open it. And I had
Yeah.
to go on YouTube. I had to go on YouTube and be like, how do you put something on the timeline? And so it was and if you ever go back and look at anything we created back then, it's rough, rough compared to what they're doing now. But we didn't know any better, and it was so new that anything that we put out was still okay. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
um, yeah. So, but you look at it nowadays, and you're like, whoa, what the heck were you guys doing? But the big thing was pep rallies. I remember we did the 2005. Yeah, I was helping out a little bit. That's probably what helped me get into what I was. But I remember the 2005 pep rally in the stadium that was sold out. Like there were like 35,000 people or something like that, and we broadcast that live, and we had like 10,000 people watching it. It was like huge. So
Oh, wow.
we knew that these things could happen, but it just took a long time to really get the support. Notre Dame Sports Properties was a business, right? They were looking to make profit and things like that. So it's not like they were going to sink a bajillion dollars into this. So we had to do it, as cheaply as we could. And then it just built up to where, I mean, they're doing amazing stuff in FIM now. So, but it was great to be in on the ground floor. Like you talk about like some of my core memories. The first time I ever shot in the locker room was 2012 at Michigan State. And I remember just being incredibly nervous. I'm a big guy, so I can't hide very well. So I was, being very judicious of where I would stand. But we won that game, and it was just a huge build up through 2012. So it was awesome.
What's it like for you to be, you mentioned growing up, you were obviously, we discussed your fandom and how into everything
Hmm.
you got, and you mentioned wanting to be a sports writer at one point, but I'm kind of curious, what was it like to be involved with the media from that perspective and see a lot of those moments up close and personal, and also be kind of part of the team in a slightly
Yeah,
different way than what you had thought you might do?
you have to pinch yourself at times. You have to like, take a little break and be like, I can't believe that I'm here. But you also have to put that aside, and do your job. But I just remember how amazingly cool it was. But I also just had to be like, you can't fanboy out right now, Alan. You can't fanboy out right now. And my friends who know me and have ever been able to watch a game with me, because there have been games that I've been able to go to, I'm a totally different person than if you'd see me in the press box or things like that, because I hold a lot of it in. I'm still a fan at heart, but I've been through enough of things that I can kind of put it aside. It's like when you're working, you put it aside. And then afterwards, you can go back and be like, wow, that was amazing. And that's one of my things that is really frustrating was the 2012 trip to Miami for the national championship game. I really didn't let myself enjoy it because I mean we worked so much. I think we put out 75 videos in the 5 days we were down there. Something it was
Oh,
some
wow.
ridiculous. It was too much. Like again, we didn't necessarily know exactly what we were doing. We were trying to do way too much. We were doing alumni interviews and updates from practice every day and all and sit down interviews and all these things. And I just remember I was like, well, I'll be able to enjoy all this after we win. And after we win, I'll go to the party and the party will be awesome. And the party was not awesome. So that was the one thing I just remember how much I worked that whole trip. And now I've gotten, older and I'm just like, you got to remember to enjoy the moment, man. Like enjoy what's happening. So
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I wouldn't, kind of researching for this, realize, kind of your different connections to the
mhm.
university growing up, but just from interacting with you in the press box, I wouldn't have necessarily. You do keep it very professional, I
Yeah,
guess is what I'm trying to get at, because I never would have been like, oh, he's a diehard
yeah,
Notre Dame deep down, diehard Notre Dame fan deep
yeah.
down or anything.
Well, your coworker Tim Priester probably caught me in the worst moment of my career. This is early in my career, but it was 2010 at USC, and there was a play like in the second quarter sometime where I think it looked like we forced a fumble way down in their own territory. And it was when you could do some instant replay, but you had to like, it's not like now when it's kind of automatic and things. And they ran the next play really quick and didn't get instant replay. And I was just beside myself because I really don't like Southern Cal. I really don't like them. So, and I just remember that I was like, this is every time we come out to this place, I'm in the press box, we get screwed. And we get screwed. And I was just like raging. And Priester just looked at me and he's like, Alan, you need to settle down. Because he was sitting right next to me. I was like, yes, thank you. I need to settle down. Yeah. But that's the one time when I was really close to like blowing my top. But, you get older and you learn things. It took me a while, probably more than some other people. But yeah. So yeah, I've learned to be able to control myself more than when I was younger.
And so you were in the media side for a little over a
Yeah.
decade, and I guess transitioned into like fighting Irish media. What
Yeah.
made you want to go back into maybe more of the SID role? In 2016, you became the Associate Athletics Communication Director for
Yeah, so another story that I'll never forget, Fiesta Bowl, out and sitting in the room editing video and stuff like that. And as FIDM became more of what it is now, they started hiring really talented people. And they started hiring people that, were trained in all this, where I was self-taught. Now the people that came in were great to me. They taught me a lot, but I was just sitting there and I'm like, I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to, I don't know if I'm going to survive this. Do you know what I mean? Like, I just don't know.
Yeah.
My skill set is as high as it needs to be. And so I was contemplating all that and figuring out like, what can I do and what's my next thing? And the lady who I mentioned, Bertie Caffarelli, ended up taking a job at the AAC. And I remember because I was out at the Fiesta Bowl and she was like, I'm sorry, I'm sending this over text, but this is happening really quick. And I'm going to take a job with the American Athletic Conference. And, I just kind of sat there and I was like, oh, wow, like that men's basketball job is open. And then again, men's basketball, just as much as football, has been a love of my life, right? In Notre Dame. And I was just like, can I do that? Maybe I could do that job. And then like maybe 15 minutes later, my phone buzzes and I look and it's Coach Bray and he goes, I need you to step in. And I was like, I'm there. I got it. And so, and that's January. So she left uh in the middle of the year. I came in and I took over. And I tell people a lot. It was like when you put on like an old coat that you've worn before that's very comfortable. And like I was literally just like, oh man, this is what I've been meant to do. And so, there was thoughts of me just doing it for that the rest of that year and then going back to what I was doing. But I'm like, nah, this is it. This is what I want to do. So I stayed with men's basketball, and that was the year after the ACC title. But I was able to do those back-to-back Elite Eight runs and all the March Madness moments that we had, and that was great times. Yeah,
What was it like going back to, I mean, you kind of had a, decade long where you were still, kind of associated with the university, but you were, I guess kind of more with the media side and
Mhm.
production and stuff. What was it like to go from, I guess, have kind of working alongside of those of us on the beat to
Yeah.
kind of having to, I mean, I know sometimes we can be difficult, so I'm kind of curious about transitioning back to that.
No, it was. I think it really helped all of FIM to have me go back to that side because I can translate what they're looking for. I can tell them why they're doing what they're doing. Um, you know, the people that do video are very creative people that have just a different mindset than somebody that's working in sports information. So you got to so I could kind of say, well, the reason that they're asking for that is for this, and the reason that they might not want to do it that way is because of this, and just to be able to translate those things. And you know, I think that was a main thing that I was able to bring, and and still to this day, there's people that are in our in FIM that are going through things that I went through, and I'm like, well, I did that job before. I could tell you this is what happens, right? And so I think that provides me a strength in FIM to be able to say, I've been through that. This is how we got there, right? This is how we figured it out. So,
Yeah, so you're kind of like
but
a,
it wasn't really, I wasn't really, I was, I wasn't really in the media, meaning that we were not doing anything critical. Though the
right.
post game show with Jack Nolan, Reggie Brooks, and Mirko Jurkovic were awesome. Like those are some of my favorite times because they could, they analyzed a little bit, and those are some rough years that we did, right? So doing a post game show after the Syracuse home game loss, that kind of stuff is tough, man. But uh, those guys made it really fun, so I really loved working with them. But we were, everything we were trying to do was positive, and so I don't really feel like I went external more than anything else. I was just kind of like, a very very closely affiliated third party. Yeah.
No, that makes sense. And put you on the spot a little bit. What's one like fond memory from, with the men's basketball team that like, I mean, you mentioned the Elite Eight run, but is there anything outside of like just a big victory or a moment that you feel comfortable sharing that you're like, oh, this is like a really cool thing that I got to see because I was in
Yeah.
this my position?
I'll share two stories. Okay. My first one was the all-time winningest coach for Coach Bray. Okay. Was something I was really proud of the way we pulled it off. I thought it was great. And we completely surprised him by having that banner that we unveiled. I don't know if people remember, but we unveiled like a banner for a year that said he was the all-time winningest coach, and he had no idea that was coming, and that was awesome. And he actually kept up a promise to me. That night he was like, when I break the record, we're going to go to the linebacker together. But that night he ended up not doing it, but he ended up when when he stepped away that night after his last thing, I'm sure some people remember that he went to the linebacker and he went to the linebacker with me, which was awesome. So I just, and that whole thing was just great of him like talking to the crowd and dropping the mic and the players' reaction. And it was just, I just really remember how we pulled that off. That also makes me think about the Matt Farrell and his brother moment that we were able to do when I was doing
Oh
that
yeah.
job. Yeah, that was awesome. And that whole reaction of the next week and how viral that went and how national it went. I mean, at one point, um, Matt and his brother were going to go on the Today Show. And I think they were also going to do the car wash at ESPN. But then, you know, because of my relationship with them and everything, Matt was able to come to me and be like, you know what, we've done enough. We don't need to keep blowing this up. And I'm awesome. You made all these arrangements and everything, but that's just not what we want to do. I just want to spend time with my brother over the holidays. So that's what we did.
Yeah.
So that was awesome. And then the other story I'll tell you, and Coach Bray and I laugh about this. We were at Virginia. Um, Virginia has a big locker room for the visiting team, and it's so big that you end up usually splitting it in two with whiteboards. And after the game, it was the game when Rex Fluger missed a three-pointer right at the end. I think would have won it or tied it. I can't really remember. And I went behind the whiteboards to stand in there while Coach came in before, and Coach was, it was one of the times when he was going to be upset to try to motivate the guys, and he took out the whiteboard, but I was standing behind it. So it didn't fall over and it fell into me. And then I took a step back and it fell. And I remember him looking at me because he didn't expect me to be there. And I'm like, and he was like, get out of the way. Right. I was like, okay. And so he yells at the team. And, I follow him to go out to the coach's locker room because he's got to go to the press conference. And as soon as the door closed with the team, he turned around at me and goes, are you okay? Are you okay? I didn't know you were back there. I just want to make sure you're okay. And I was like, Coach, I'm fine, man. It's going to take a lot more than, that to take me out. But that's the thing that I remember because again, coaches, when that moment happens, it's very, they're trying to perform and get their team and like set a tone, right? He's not mad at me when he told me to get,
Yeah.
and so I just remember that's the kind of coach he was. I love that guy. So he's great.
He couldn't break character in that moment.
No, he
And
couldn't. At that moment, he could not break character. But I mean, literally, as soon as that door closed the locker room, he goes, Alan, I'm sorry. Are you okay? I just want to make sure you're okay. I'm like, Coach, man, I'm good. It's okay. So,
nice. And then so now you're the current assistant athletic director, team
yeah,
communications. You're back working with the football team. You're
yeah,
working with all of us in the beat all the time. You're, the one
yeah. So
directing us. And
we have a great communications team now. So, Katie's the advisor to the head coach. Claire Cunningham is the director of football media relations now, and they are helped by Sarah Measley, who we brought over, who spent like I think it was 16 years at St. Mary's, and now is doing awesome stuff with us. So they're the ones that are really running the football stuff like the day to day. The way I help them is to do credentialing, game day operations, things like that. So, you'll see me around at certain things and all that, but they're the ones that are doing the grinding day to day stuff. I'm kind of like the fourth guy when they need some extra help to pop in and do things. But, I do I think I said I do the media guy for them. I do credentialing, anything that they need that they can't do in their daily day stuff. I just kind of swap up. And then, I manage the whole group of athletic communicators too. So
okay. So so you're kind of involved with the football team. But it sounds like are you helping a little bit of everywhere or
yeah,
what?
yes, most
Okay.
definitely. Yeah, yeah. Helping everybody that does athletic communications jobs for other teams. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Interesting. I guess that
yeah,
makes sense. But I
yeah.
always see you around, so I probably
Well,
should have.
I'm never not gonna be around the football team as much as I can, but um, the crew that we have is great, and that's the kind of thing that happens at this point in your career, and I think it's for anybody that's been doing stuff as long as I have. Like, you have to judge when it's time to turn things over to other people, when it's time to delegate, I'm a horrible delegator. I like to do everything myself. I'm sure everybody around athletic communications office will tell you that. I need to delegate more. But you also want to make sure that you are connected enough and help out enough and know what's going on. So when you are called to help them and do things, that you're not some alien person that just shows up. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
So you got to go, yeah, you got to do it back and forth.
Right. And one other thing that's listed on your bio on the university
Mhm.
website is that you're kind of the team historian.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I've come to you when I've had some questions. I remember I was doing a story a couple years ago on to see, I think when Logan Diggs was still before he transferred, that was going to be the first time in a long time they had two running backs with over 800 or 900 yards in a season coming back in a while. And I remember
Mhm.
coming to you like, how do I find this information? Going back to like the 40s and 30s and you kind of walking me through that. But I'm kind of curious, through that experience, I learned how difficult it can be at times to
Oh yeah,
find
yeah.
information. Sports writers didn't cover games the same ways we do now, things like that. So I'm kind of curious, um, what's that process been like to throw yourself into that historian role, and what are some of the challenges you've kind of come across?
Well, the good thing is it's a really good bucket for somebody to, when people have questions like that they know who to reach out to. And you know, we do get on occasion requests like that. But it's also, the football comms team is really worried about the day to day and what's happening, right? They sometimes the big picture can escape them, and that's okay. But it's like, you know, I was inspired a lot by the late Lou Emoji, who, I mean, had an encyclopedia type of memory of everything. And in my younger years, I used to get frustrated because when something happened in the football game, our communications people would just walk over to Lou and ask him when it happened. Now, because it was easy and Lou was great, but I'd be like, we need to know how to find that stuff, right? And I don't have the memory skills that Lou has, so I have to write everything down and research everything and do everything. And one of the things that I've been really militant about is anytime we look up something like that, we need to figure out a way to record it and put it somewhere where we can access it again. And then the one thing that uh, somebody did, I don't know who made the ultimate decision to do this, but when I first worked at Notre Dame, we used to have hundreds of filing cabinets full of all the information, right? So if you were a student athlete at Notre Dame, you had a what's called a print file and a photo file. So everybody, if we ever had a photo of you, it went in your photo file. If we ever wrote something about you, it went in your print file. Okay. And they all lived in these file cabinets that were in our office. And and one day somebody decided all this needs to get digitized. And they started sending all this stuff off to get digitized. And that all happened in like 2015, 2016, 2017, something like that. But it's all just kind of sat there and no one's done a whole lot with it. And one of the things I wanted to do was I want to get to a point where I know everything that's happened in every football game, right? So how do I figure that out? So I need to find all these box scores. And all that stuff has been scanned in some way. So I just needed to dedicate time to be able to go through there and find everything. So since 1933, I've been able to find at least what was considered a box score of every single Notre Dame football game moving forward to today.
Wow.
And trying to get that all organized, digitized, and figure it out. But then you start trying to do like, okay, what year can we reliably go back and find defensive stats? Because what's really frustrating is until sometimes until the 70s, they did not care about defensive stats. They weren't even recorded. Like no one did anything with them. So you can imagine all those players during those eras that did all these amazing things, right? Like that don't have their stats recorded. So, so you start trying to figure out, okay, how far back can we reliably get defensive stats? And we can kind of get back to like 68, 69. But then you start saying, well, when is when does a sack become an official stat? So I know I'm getting
Right.
really nerdy on you and everything like that, right? But the amazing thing is the late Ross Browner, right? Everybody knows that he's our all-time sack leader. Okay. But they didn't record them as sacks back then. Okay. Sometimes in a very rare instance in a play-by-play, they will say he sacked the quarterback. But so I just decided, okay, I have all these defensive stats and I have everything that I pretty much need since 1973, right? So let me just start in 1973, the first game, going through every play. And that's what I've been doing. I've been going through every single play and recording all these things that happen during every play. And I don't have it off the top of my head right now, but I remember I sent it to Tim Priester, and you know, our guy Ross Browner has our sack record. I mean, I think he had 45, 50 sacks or something like that.
Wow.
And what I mean is, like, you look in the play by play and it's back to pass tackled by Ross Browner. I mean, that's a sack, right? They just didn't call
Right.
it that back in the day. So one of the things I want to do, and I honestly don't know if I'm going to get it done this summer or not, is to be able to at least record that in the media guide. And it can't be our official record because we can only go by what the NCAA says, but we'll be able to list in there and be like, okay, from 1973 forward, this is who has as many sacks and as many 20-yard runs and as many 40-yard receptions and all those things that I've been trying to compile. And that's where I want to get to, because I think by doing that, and what happens now calls back to the history of our program and honors those people that did that. Do you know what I mean? So when you can say that Jeremiah Love runs for 150 yards in the first half next year, hopefully, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can go, well, you know who did that 5 times was Julius Jones. You know who did that 6 times was Autry Denson. And it's kind of a way to plug everything back in and get those guys recognition while the current team is doing what they're doing too. And that's really motivating to me.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting even from like my perspective when I'm writing a game story. You guys do a really good job of, you might announce it in the press box, but then you also put it on the
Mhm.
Notre Dame PR account and stuff too. But
Yep.
that's really useful because I think fans really do appreciate like, oh, who was the last time this person did it? It not only it recognizes those last players and also lets you know how significant
Yes.
that accomplishment is today. And I think kind of curious because it's interesting because it's important just for like the history of college football, but
Mhm.
also just Notre Dame. Like that is a place
Yep.
that, I mean, you think back to Notre Dame, you might think of Newt Rockne, which is the 1920s and things like that. So it's kind of difficult. I'm sure it's important to you. I'm guessing that you recognize that area in a way
Yep.
that maybe you weren't able to previously.
Yeah, and one of the things that like will really annoy me is the USC game last year, right? We have what was it, 98 and a 100-yard interception return or whatever it was. And we go through what we have available and we're like longest interception return in school history. And then literally like 35 seconds later, somebody will be like, well, Bill Shakespeare had one for 115 and all that. And that's what I'm saying. Like, that's what I don't want to necessarily have happen. I need to make sure that all that is accurate. But there's so much and there's so much going on and there's so many games. And SIDs are so overworked all the time that sometimes things don't get recorded right or things don't get remembered right or all those things. And at some point we have the ability now to put that stuff together, digitize it, and have it. And it's not just for me, but all this stuff is going to be organized for in perpetuity, right? And then you start thinking about, what's coming around the corner with AI and all those things and all that stuff. Eventually, someday, maybe we'll be able to plug that in and we'll get quicker answers and all those things. But it needs to be compiled and it needs to be found. And that's like my main goal right now is to try to figure that out.
No, definitely. And what's it like for you as somebody who, going back to middle school and high school where I mean, just writing down stats and going, cutting up newspaper clippings and all that stuff to now have a important part of your job being kind of immortalize those eras even
Yeah, it's
from the past.
yeah, it's not it's not work. It's like I go to work, but it's not work. When I'm doing stuff like that, it doesn't feel like work to me. It's like what I would be doing in my spare time anyway. The really cool thing is going through all those files. I found so many really, really, really interesting stories that I want to try to figure out what I can figure out. it'll take way too long to run you through the story, but there was a game in Syracuse in the 50s that at the very end of the game, Notre Dame was attempting like a 56-yard field goal, okay? And they missed it, but Syracuse roughed the kicker. But back then there was no like there wasn't a rule in there that said that the game can't end on a defensive penalty.
Oh, wow.
And so the at the time, the officials moved the ball up 15 yards. Notre Dame kicked the game-winning field goal at the end of the thing. It kind of ruined Syracuse season. Notre Dame wasn't very good that year, but Syracuse, that was like their third loss and knocked them out of a major bowl or something like that. And college football melted down. People don't remember this, but I mean melted down. There were hundreds of letters sent to the university that Notre Dame needs to give the win back to Syracuse because they didn't win it right. There was an official in like the East Coast conference back in the day that said that Notre Dame shouldn't have got another down because the rules weren't very clear. And what's funny is at the time of the game, when the game happened, no one at the game really cared. Like it just happened. And everybody was like, "Oh, well, that makes sense." But then this official came out afterwards and said, "Well, Notre Dame shouldn't have got it because back then, if you missed a kick, the other team got the ball at this 20 no matter what," which was weird, right? But so there were all these different things that went on. But through all those files that they have, we have all the correspondence. We have Father Joyce like sending letters back to these people and explaining to them what
Oh,
happened. We have his speech from the football banquet when he went through the whole thing. It was like, no, we're not giving this win back. But just that's just a small microcosm of the stuff that we can find in there. And all that stuff is so the stats are one side of it, but the other side of it is to be able to like remember that history and all those stories and all those things and to be able to do something with them or at least be able to recall it really quickly and figure out something. So that's the next thing I want to do is just figure out what to do with all of those stories.
yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm definitely there. Sounds like there's a lot of interesting things. And if you ever want to pass some of those ideas along to Irish Illustrated, I'm sure we would be
I'm sure
grateful.
you would. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I also wanted to get, so we kind of, brought it back to your youth a little bit. And I
Yeah.
know something we talked about a little bit before we started recording is um, you mentioned, 16 years of Catholic school, and you went to St. Adalbert's in South Bend for a little bit
Yeah.
of that. And I know that's a program that in recent years has been a lot, or a school, I guess, a great school that the football program has been a lot more connected with.
Mhm.
Marcus Freeman's visited a few times. I believe it was either this year or last year or both, where he gave them tickets, the students, to the Blue Gold game.
Yep.
When Marcus Freeman won the Dodd Trophy, like that's in the press release that's like a school he connected to. And I'm kind of curious
Yep.
what impact, if any, you've had on that, and how important it is to kind of bring that connection in this program back to a place that um, had such a foundation for you.
I could take zero credit for it. It's
Okay.
it's Marcus Freeman, but what was cool was somebody, whether it was Katie Lonergan or somebody, knew that I went to school there, and it that endeavor each year is supported by Allstate. So one of the things that we like to do is write a story about it, and that year we recruited John Bryce to write a story about it. So I was able to drive him down to my grade school alma mater when Coach Free was gonna surprise them with the fact that they're going to the Blue Gold game. So I just got to go back to my old stomping grounds. It was pretty funny. I mean, my all of my uncles on my dad's side went to school there. When I went to school there, my grandparents lived 2 blocks away, so I was able after school every day to go over and hang out with them till my parents picked me up after work. Um, yeah, I met great friends there. So yeah, that place is really special to me. But I just was like, I was like the add on at the very end. Hey, Alan, we're going to St. Elberstein. I was like, oh, we are. I didn't even know. That's great. So, but Coach Free had a connection with them and was able to do that for them, which was great. So,
Curious what it was like for you too I mean, it sounds like back then that was around the same period where you were begging to go to football games if you
Yeah.
could, and stuff to then kind of see them pass it along. Did you kind of, I don't know, in a weird way relate or think back to like what that moment might have meant to you,
Well,
um, as a student?
one of the frustrations in my time at Notre Dame is there was a time when we kind of um, how do I put this the right way? Because we didn't do it on purpose, but a lot of the local fans got turned off. And whether it was when they did the expansion of the stadium and added on some money they had to pay for their season tickets that were long time tickets, and you know I don't know all the details to that, so I don't want to necessarily say whether it was good or bad, but there were a lot of local fans that got turned off. And one of my things is the whole time is I'm always pushing, to try to do as much as we can, as much as in our power. Also, we got to reach out to um, the next generation of fans too. So those kids at St. Adalbert's might not have ever thought that they could go to a Blue Gold game, or it just wasn't on the radar, or all those things. And just to be able to give them that and start hopefully new fans that young is really appealing to the program and to me. And as being from South Bend, um, it's tough for me to hear stories when, like, there's some people my age who are like, yeah, I don't go to games anymore. Notre Dame doesn't care about me as a local fan. That's not necessarily true. So, and I always push back about that. So,
Yeah, and now you're seeing some of the ways that they're
yeah,
directly trying to engage.
yeah.
That's cool. My last question is so Lou Holtz, this is kind of a famous quote, but he once said, "Those who know Notre Dame, no explanations necessary. Those who don't, no explanation will suffice." So it's kind of a difficult question to answer,
Mhm.
but how would you try and explain what makes Notre Dame special or unique based on your own experiences?
Uh, it's difficult because I don't know anything different, but also on the flip side, I don't want to know anything different. um, uh, the people that Notre Dame attracts are very special. Um, I've met the my classmates at Notre Dame are the best friends of my life and the best people that I've ever met. And it's because of the people that are attracted to Notre Dame to either go to school there, be alumni there, or be fans of them. Um, and so we ask that a lot when we're interviewing somebody that we hope will come work at Notre Dame, and they'll go around and ask us, what is it about Notre Dame? And even people that aren't as connected to it as I am are always about the people that work there and the people that the place attracts, the student athletes that it attracts are just a different realm than anything else. Now, when I say that I don't know anything else, it's the people that come from other places and tell me those things. They're like, it's just different here, right? And so, um, and to go back in my story when my parents were, trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life, I couldn't conceive of going to school anywhere else, even though I wasn't worthy to go to Notre Dame at that time. I was just like, can't go to like IU, right? Like that's not my thing. It's not what I want. So I just don't know of anything else. And what's funny is my parents moved back to town here when my mom was pregnant with me. They lived in Dallas. Both one of my sisters was born in Dallas, the other one was in Fort Wayne. So, I was close to being a Texan. Until my dad came back to take over my grandfather's business. But I thank them all the time. I was like, thank you for coming back here. And I was able to be raised around my grandparents and know my grandparents, and just get you know so involved with the university that it's been a part of my life forever, and it will be as long as I'm kicking.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today, explain your story, kind of share a little bit about the evolution of the, you know, Notre Dame media department and kind of explain a little bit about what you do because I know you and the rest of your team are often behind the scenes.
Well,
But I think you
that's
do a
the
lot of
yeah.
important
Look, I
things.
I love to talk, and I'm sure that some people that know me have heard all these stories before. I, I love to talk about Notre Dame and do things, but also one of my big things about my time at Notre Dame is I always like to live in the shadows, and I don't necessarily like attention drawn to me. Do you know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
but um, as being a football historian, sometimes I need to put myself out there a little bit more, but also like, I appreciate Irish Illustrated and what you guys do. And so if you guys are going to ask me to do something, I'm going to do it for you. But so it's kind of like a mixed thing, right? I love to tell these stories and I love to talk about it. I can talk about Notre Dame stats for hours, right? But also, an SID is the person that's behind the person, right? It's not necessarily the person that's in the front getting all the attention. But the reason I just want to do this because I love talking about it. Let's just put it that way. Not necessarily to draw all this attention of the great things that I've done because I'm just a dude, man. I'm just a dude that likes Notre Dame and wants to work hard for the place. So
No, yeah, and I appreciate you saying that about Irish Illustrated. And I think it's a cool for people to, I mean, obviously you can come from anywhere to
yeah,
work in the sports information department, but also to see the work you're doing to kind of recapture some of that history and somebody who's, kind of grown up around it. And I'm sure a lot of fans can kind of relate to it, even if they didn't get to do what you're doing now. So I
yeah.
really
And I
appreciate
will
you having
say when I do put out the media guide, um, just give me a couple days to enjoy it that I've got it done before you point out the errors because there are a lot of fans around the country that send letters to point out the errors. And to be perfectly honest with you, I want it to be great and I don't have any problem with that. But just give me like a week before you send the email, just so I can enjoy that I've finished the project for a week. And then I'll figure out what was wrong with it.
All right,
Because again, we're never going to get everything right. But
definitely. Well, it's a hard job as we
yeah,
discussed. But you heard that here, fans. If you have a letter you want to write after it comes out, just hold on to it for a week.
just give me a few days and I'll be all right. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate
Hey,
it.
Andrew, thanks, man. I appreciate you.